lucky me, I'm going to get to interview our special guest. So let me tell you a little bit about our first special guest today. We've got our good friend and huge inspiration, Jasmine Florentine. So please help me in the chat. Welcome, Jasmine Florentine. How are you this morning, Jasmine?
Hi, I'm good. Thank you. I feel very silly. I'm on my iPad instead of my computer because my computer is still boxed up because I'm not even at my apartment right now because we just moved countries. So I haven't been able to change my name on this. So just to introduce myself properly, my name is Jasmine Florentine. For the what I do part, I got a little stuck because I do a lot of things, but it can pretty much be encapsulated as STEM education, and my pronouns are she and her.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Jasmine. So I know you said you just moved. Where did you move from and where did you move to?
I just moved from Tel Aviv, Israel to Nottingham in the UK. And we don't actually have Wi-Fi in our apartment yet either. So I'm actually sitting in an office at Nottingham Trent University, which is where my spouse works.
Mm-hmm.
So, and we're having unseasonably hot weather apparently, which is unfortunate because I managed to unpack all of my sweaters, but I haven't really found most of my not sweater clothes yet.
I know that feeling. I just moved apartments, like 5 minutes away from my old apartment, so not in any way comparable. But you always find the wrong clothes, the ones you don't want to wear. I feel you on that. Well, as we're going through this interview, I'm gonna talk with Jasmine, kind of interview her here. But as we're going through this, everybody, as you have questions for Jasmine, feel free to pop those in the chat. We'll elevate those. I'll ask kind of on your behalf as we go throughout. But so, Jasmine, one of the reasons we were really excited to talk to you was about the Project Trix curriculum. But I know that's not where you started. So you're an educator, you're a STEM educator. Maybe just tell us a little bit about your background, like. Did you start as a teacher? What did you start teaching? How did you get into education?
Yeah, so my background's in mechanical engineering, and I kind of came into education sort of sideways because my first full-time job was at First Robotics, which is a nonprofit that runs robotics competitions for students to get them interested in STEM. And I came in as an engineer on the team, so I was basically helping design the games that the students would be playing, but then designing the actual mechanical components, and was also kind of 20% of the time doing the artwork for it as well. It was pretty much the coolest job ever. The only reason I left it is because we moved out of the country. But when we moved out of the country, I sort of took on a more standard robotics job and very quickly realized that I really missed being in STEM education. Even though like my job at first, I wasn't necessarily the one doing the education work so much as doing the engineering work, but still it was like I would go to the competitions, I would talk to these students and teachers and learn all these inspiring stories about how like, oh, we had this student and he was always withdrawn and didn't really do great in classes, and then he joined a First Robotics team, and the fact that it was so much more hands-on, he really came out of his shell, like stories like that made me really want to go back into that space. So when we moved countries again, I decided to give freelance a try. So I'd already been working on a book that had like a STEM element to it, and decided to try and do stuff in the STEM education space. And so I've been doing sort of a lot of different things. So I'm not a classroom teacher, but I've been working with teachers to sort of design curriculums or teach workshops that the teachers can then take to their students. And so I've been kind of have my hands in a lot of places right now, from like designing projects, designing curriculums, and doing workshops, and writing more books that have like a STEM element to kind of grab the attention of kids who might be interested in comic books and reading, but may not necessarily see STEM as their thing. So that's sort of how I came into this space and where I'm at now.
I love that. I love that you came from a mechanical engineering background, but had a little taste of teaching, and you're like, okay, so I can't give this up. And I think a lot of people are like that. We were talking at one of the previous Make-A-Thons with a lot of teachers they started out like, oh, I wanted to be a doctor, or I wanted to be, oh, so many teachers actually started out wanting to be in the medical professions and then discovered teaching because, you know, they really just, they kind of want to help. They want to do good. And they, you know, were finding that they were having a more direct impact as an educator. So I love that kind of happened for you too. You're in a mechanical engineering place and then transitioned to loving teaching.
Thank
So
you.
another thing that is so cool and exciting to me is your artwork. You'd mentioned that you were working on a book, and the artwork in Project Trix, I was just pulling up just some of the like additional assets. So if you're familiar with Project Trix, you're familiar with this cute little character with their head in a bubble and this little like dog. Like these visuals are so amazing. So how does art factor into all of this for you? How did you learn to do this?
That's something I've always been doing. I've always been drawing. So early on, like as a kid, I loved making things, but I didn't really know about engineering. So I channeled that a lot into artwork. So, you know, I still draw comics, cartoons, like drawing in the margins of my notebook, building like puppets and origami, things like that. So that's something I've always loved doing. And again, it was sort of, I'd always wanted to kind of combine engineering with art. And so I got to do that when I worked at First Robotics. And then I get to do that now as a freelancer. And actually, that's one thing that I should mention again, is that I didn't really know what engineering was, which is, you know, everything got channeled into the artwork. But that was actually another reason that I am very passionate about the STEM education space, because I sort of feel like a lot of kids don't have the clearest idea of what engineering is. I think it's a lot better than it used to be when I was in school.
Yeah.
But it's sort of something that I want, you know, kids who enjoy making to understand that there's careers out there that are making stuff.
Yeah, I definitely felt that when I was a kid too. I thought an engineer wore a floppy hat and stood in a train. And I didn't
Exactly.
know what he did in the train because it's not like he steered it. It was on tracks. I knew that. So I really didn't, but I was like, okay, if I want to wear a cool floppy hat, that's what an engineer does. Got it. No, different. Different thing. Yeah. So I love how that's kind of like a personal mission of yours, is making sure that students know that, like, if you like art and tinkering and making, and that is actually engineering, that's a pathway into engineering. That's great. So I wanted to talk about your book too. So you wrote and illustrated this book, Hex Allen and the
I
Clanksmiths, or?
I did not illustrate. So I
Okay.
illustrated the engineering images, but
Okay.
that beautiful cover and the interior artwork is by Ebony Glenn.
Okay.
Who you should look up her artwork as well, because it's absolutely stunning. But yeah, sorry, I'll let you
No,
continue.
please, no. That so tell me about the process for writing this book. Where did it come from? How did you meet up with Ebony to do this amazing artwork? Tell us a little bit about this book.
Yeah, so I started this in graduate school actually, but again, I didn't really focus on it until I was at working at First and got more interested in STEM education. But I wanted to do something that would introduce. Basically, it was almost like what would I have wanted as a kid that would have introduced me to engineering and STEM in general and made it less intimidating. And so as a kid, I was really obsessed with the Magic School Bus, and that kind of got me into the sciences. So I wanted sort of something like that, where the book, where there's a story that on its own is a really fun, interesting story, but throughout incorporates STEM into it. So in this case, Hex Allen is a fantasy book, and it follows sort of the traditional fantasy adventure of like fighting monsters and you know, escaping from dungeons and things like that. But the thing is that the characters, instead of using magic or swords or anything, they're all using engineering. And so Hex, the main character, is the only person, or one of the very few people in her world, who can't do magic. And so she's trying to kind of figure out her place in this world and discovers engineering through that. And so every single project in the book is something that can actually be built. And at the very end, you'll see my illustrations, which are the instructions on how to actually go and build all of these projects.
Oh my gosh, that is so cool. So the projects, because that's something that, I mean, I think a lot of us did. I was a big reader as a kid. And so like whenever I read about something in a book, I was like, so I'm building a tree house, or like, okay, so I'm seeing if I can set a leaf on fire with a magnifying glass. Like you saw it in a movie or you read it in a book or something, and then you wanted to do it. So I love that the projects that the character does here, there's actually like plans that kids can do them themselves. Can you tell us about like one of the projects in there? That is so cool.
Yeah, I actually wish I had a hard copy to open it up and show you guys. I should have brought one for the apartment. I was gonna say, it's funny you mentioned the magnifying glass, because I had to cut one of the projects, which was using a Fresnel lens.
Uh-huh.
And I was, like, oh, it'd be cool just to show you can like singe something, but not like, let's not go so far
Yeah.
as testing it on fire.
Right.
Let's just say that me testing it resulted in me running around trying to find water real quick. So cut that project out for safety reasons. But I guess actually I can send a YouTube link to one of the projects if
Oh.
that's easier than me trying to explain it.
Oh yeah, that'd be great if you can find that YouTube link. I mean, I
Yeah.
think also while you're finding it, that is such a classic teacher thing too. It's like, all right, I got this great idea. We're totally gonna do it in my classroom. It's definitely gonna work. And just in case, I'm just gonna just double check really quick to see if it really does work. And then you try it out, and then you realize, oh no, this is not gonna work in my classroom. Not because the experiment won't work, but because the magnifying glass is dangerous and fire may result. So I love that the process of writing your book is the same as the process for writing a lesson plan. That's great.
Whoop. There we go.
Perfect.
So
I'll
that
pull
is
that up
that is one of the projects. That's, I think, maybe one of the more involved projects. But it's this
Great.
time-lapse video of a motorized cart, and the characters are using it because they need to basically create a distraction. And so they attach smoke bombs to it. That is something I do not include instructions for. But again, I actually consulted with a friend who's in chemical engineering to make sure that I was getting all the science accurate, even if I'm not actually given the instructions. But in the book, they attach the smoke bombs to this little cart and like let it go and use that as a distraction to run away. So
Oh, that's awesome. I love the rubber band treads that I'm seeing on here too. These are all when we make little carts out of we use a lot of hummingbirds to make little carts. Oh my gosh, this looks so great. Oh, that's a really fun one. And look at these illustrations. Oh, these are beautiful. That is, man, I'm very excited. I did not intend to just like absolutely go buy a book after this, but this is great. I need to have this in my library for when my friends with kids come over to be like, listen, let's sit down and that is so fun. Where did you get the idea to make a book that then also had instructions to do the thing afterward? That's amazing. Where'd that idea come from?
I originally I wanted to do a comic book. And so in a comic book, I think it sort of like makes more sense to have like the illustrated instructions integrated in. And then eventually I decided that writing a novel would be easier. I was wrong about that, by the way. It is not easier. But because of that, it sort of made sense that like, well, if it's not going to be illustrated as part of the graphic novel, then like they have to be illustrated in some way. So it's sort of like, this is the character's design notebook. And that's where you're getting all the instructions from.
That's great. It also kind of reminds me of a series of unfortunate events. Violet always ties her hair up with a ribbon when she's about to invent something or when she's about to solve a problem. And I love that we get this character's actual design notebook and that these designs are tested and they work. And it's not just like, and then we sprinkle pixie dust over the top of it and then it works. It's like, no, and then you plug the motor in and then it works, right? So it's like, it's a practical guide. That's great.
Yeah, that was basically what I was trying to go for, because there's a lot of stuff where you see like fictional engineering, like Iron Man is sort of the one that comes to mind. And it's really cool, but it's all sci-fi. It's not something you can actually go out and then, well, actually there probably are people building Iron Man suits right now, but something a little more realistic.
Yeah, an arc reactor is not exactly practical for a 12-year-old to build, but a little car and maybe they attach smoke bombs onto it or not, whatever your choice. Like that is something a 12-year-old could build. That's awesome. Okay, so from Hex Allen, amazing book. How did you get involved with the microbit? Because that's how we really first, or that's how I at least got really first like aware of you, was this Project Trix curriculum. So how'd you get connected with the microbit?
Yeah, so it's funny because I didn't even know. So when I was writing Hex, I wanted to like do something with programming and eventually opted not to because I didn't know about the microbit at the time. I knew about Arduino and I was like, Arduino is going to be far too like complex. Let's not even go there. And when I first started freelance, one of my first projects was a live action role playing game that is a week-long camp that gets girls interested in programming. So that's called the Anywhere Academy. You can look that up as well. Anywhere spelled N-E-W-E-A-R because it's about wearables. And the wearables are all microbit based. And so when I first started working on the project, the people I was collaborating with sent me a microbit to play with. And I was just like, wow, this is the coolest thing ever. And so, you know, I was designing all these projects for the game, but then also just on my own started having fun with the microbit because I was realizing there was so much potential here that, you know, again, with the Arduino, I didn't feel like that was something I could comfortably teach to like, I don't know, a 9 or 10-year-old, whereas the microbit I could get working within minutes. And so what happened was I was playing with that. I have always loved working with paper because I used to do origami. And this is a bit of a roundabout, probably longer version of the story than you need, but whatever. Oh, now that
we're here for it. I want the long version. I want all the details. This is the behind the scenes, you know?
Because at this point with freelance, I was also just trying to learn more about this STEM education space because when I worked at First, I was really just in the world of First. And one of the people I wound up meeting online, at least, was Javon Moss, who makes these amazing wearable robots. They're super cute, but they're all 3D printed. So I was talking to him about like, how can we do something that can be, you know, more appropriate for kids? And, you know, we kind of bounced ideas and, you know, he's like, well, maybe you could do something out of cardboard. So I started playing with cardboard. And I actually was struggling a bit with the cardboard and decided to try paper. And that was how I made my first paper robot, which was the Ticklebot. And I put that on Twitter and that kind of like took off on its own. And so I guess I had independently already been contacting like different organizations about freelance stuff. And Microbit, I guess, saw the Ticklebot and I had been contacting them and they wanted to work with me. And I was delighted to work with them because I was already pretty obsessed with the Microbit at this point. So that's kind of how I came to the Microbit and got, you know, started working with Microbit directly. And now I'm just basically anytime anyone's like, oh, I have a kid who's kind of interested in like, you know, engineering and robotics, I'm like, get them a Microbit. It's so cool. Like within, you know, 5 minutes, they'll have something up and running.
Yeah. And I love that the Ticklebot predated Project Trix. I don't think the last 3 to 4 years have been a real blur and like time is a flat circle now. And I don't know what came first and what came next. So I love knowing like if you haven't checked out Jasmine Florentine on Twitter yet, this was, I guess this is maybe how I first became aware of you because this was everywhere on Twitter. This little, like you touch his foot and he freaks out. Like this little guy was everywhere. You had like an octopus bot too, right? That like crinkled up its legs. There's so many funky little designs that you've got that are just so inspiring. And, you know, me and Matt, we're always on the lookout for like simple robots made with simple materials that are engaging for kids. So you can see the octopus robot up here. So that Ticklebot kind of, okay, so you made that, you made an instructable, like an instruction manual to go with it, which you can check out here, and that's in the chat for you too. We'll also put all these resources from the chat on Padlet. So if you want to check out Hex Allen and the Clanksmiths, if you want to check out the Ticklebot or Jasmine's Twitter, you can find that on the Padlet. So this Ticklebot kind of made the Microbit Foundation aware of you. So then there's this Project Trix thing. And when you tell people what Project Trix is, how do you explain it? Because I'd love to hear your like pitch. What is Project Trix according to the creator?
Oh, wow. I guess I think of it as it's a curriculum, but it's driven by a story and a character to make it more engaging and more, or I guess more friendly. There's a better word for it, but it's not coming to me right now.
Like approachable, more
Approachable.
like
That's
relatable.
exactly.
Yeah.
And approachable, and it and something that contextualizes all the projects. So basically it's this curriculum with a bunch of projects, but they're all wrapped up in a story driven by a character, which gives a reason for the projects to exist. So and I think that's really important, because otherwise you're just sort of like, okay, I'm coding this to give a random word, but why am I making random words? And if it's in the context of, well, actually Trix wants to write a poem, and now the random words are helping them generate this poem, now we have a bit of a story here. And why is Trix generating a poem? Well, they're there, Trix has come to Earth to learn about Earth for a school assignment, and one of the things they want to learn about is English literature. And so everything kind of Trix basically ties all of the projects together.
Beautifully. It ties all the projects together beautifully. It is, when we first happened upon this curriculum, like, it is so aligned with what we believe about teaching here too. Because as you guys have seen, if you come to any of our student shows, or if you stick around for Robot Memories, we find that teaching through narrative and through character is so approachable and so friendly and so inviting, especially for kids who, there are some kids that you hold up a microbit or a piece of technology and you say, we're going to do coding today. And some kids are like, yeah, I'm in. And some kids are like, whatever. And some kids are even beyond that. They're like, oh, that looks scary to me, or that looks intimidating to me, right? And so the promise of technology doesn't hit the same for all kids. And so, all right, if the technology is not an engagement tool for all kids, how do you engage under-engaged? And this is also like, those under-engaged students are usually also the students who have been underserved by STEM in the past. That would be the groups of kids that we already know about, right? Girls, students of color, students of lower socioeconomic background, students with learning exceptionalities, and rural students. They've traditionally had less access to high quality STEM materials, high quality STEM teachers, high quality STEM curriculum. So like, those kids, if they're in middle school and they haven't touched a robot yet, and you say, we're doing robotics, good chance that kid might say, oh, that sounds like a lot of math, and I don't like math. Right. And they've got these pre-existing ideas about this now. So this Project Trix curriculum is so great because it draws on these things that humans do naturally, which is tell stories. There's this story about this little alien who's going to come visit, and we're preparing for this new friend to come visit. That like empathy piece of, what would it be like if you were going somewhere new by yourself? And what if you could communicate with the people you were going to go visit? That empathy piece is just so lovely. Like, how did the story about Trix come about? Like, had you always had a little alien character in your head, or were you thinking of, like, was this during like a move, like an international move on your part, where you were thinking about visiting a new place? Like, where did that, someone is coming to visit and we're using our microbits to prepare for them, how did that part of the story come about?
So that actually came from, so I collaborated very closely with the Microbit Foundation, and that came from them because I was working with Giles, especially, who was, I believe he was a teacher formerly. And so he said that was actually sort of, at least in the UK, like a thing that they do in classrooms sometimes, where they have this frame story of a visitor to the classroom, and they use that to frame some of the lessons or curriculums. So what had happened is, I think, as I had proposed a number of different stories, and they came back with that one, and then we, designed the character and everything, and that it just seemed to, it worked really well, because again, the empathy part becomes such an important part of the story there, and again, that was Microbit's idea, especially because, again, they're a lot of them have experiences teaching students in the classroom, which is something I don't have. I've worked with students one-on-one, and I've worked in workshops and stuff, but I haven't actually been a classroom teacher. And so having that experience and knowledge from them is really what we needed to put the whole puzzle together. Because I sort of came in and I have experience with like contextualizing things in stories, but but what is the story that will work in a classroom setting is really important as well.
Yeah. I mean, that idea of we're preparing to welcome someone new to our classroom, that just hits so many socio-emotional learning components. Like now we have this word, right? Socio-emotional learning. They even have standards associated with socio-emotional learning. And I'm like, okay, sure, that's fine. But it hits that empathy piece. Something that comes up with teachers when we teach Project Trix a lot is this like human-centered design element, like designing something for a person. And it's funny when we talk about that with Project Trix, we talk about human-centered design, but we're designing for an alien. So like we say like person-centered design. They're a person, you know. But we're really thinking about, I think my favorite setup for any of the projects is Project 3, which is Starry Night, and the letter that Trix sends to the classroom. So each of the projects is introduced with a little letter, and that letter is like, hey guys, I just thought about something. You know, this is going to be my first time away from home, and in my world, the stars twinkle all the time, and I'm really going to miss that. Anyway, I'll see you guys soon. Like that's the letter. It doesn't even set up a problem necessarily. So I love that as an entry point for using technology, because like, okay, what is Trix feeling? They're worried they're going to get homesick. And what is something that we now know from context clues that we could do to make them feel more welcome? Well, we could make some stars. Let's use our microbit to make some twinkling stars. So when it's dark, we have a twinkling star, and when the lights are on, so like we'll turn all the lights out right when Trix gets here and welcome them in with twinkling stars. And I just like everything about that setup is so kind and so gentle, and so like, let's think about how to welcome someone, not let's think about how to prepare for an invasion, right? Like it's also just so obvious that like women were involved in the writing of this curriculum, because it's not about war. It's like, it's about empathy and welcoming, and like I'm so taken with it. It is such a lovely curriculum. But I'm also dying to know, and also one of our friends, Corinne, in the chat said, I love the story. I think this will be amazing to introduce it to my special education students, which is again just lovely, thinking about how are people feeling right now? How could we help with that? I'm dying to know if you can share, and if you can't, that's okay. But if you can share, what were some of the other stories that you guys pitched, or that you pitched to them? Do you remember any of those other like characters or framing
Oh
devices
boy.
or anything? This has been a while. I know.
I don't know if I don't remember the other stories. I do remember some of the characters because I actually probably still have sketches of them. I think one of the big things was that originally, hold on, I'm gonna like just check my sketches real quick and make sure I'm not lying to you.
And while Jasmine's doing that, let me bring back up some of the other actual drawings that made it in. So like here's like Trix with a microbit. They're looking at the microbit. These are all graphics that we like use in our PD versions of these as well. So look at it's strapped to their head. So cute. I love that. They're like rocking out. Now it's a belt. I love that we brought in some wearables with it too. Knowing that part of your history with the microbit is with wearables makes this drawing so much better. I love it. That's great. Yeah, do you have any other
yeah. So I was gonna say, I don't remember the stories, but I do remember like the early designs. So the one thing was I was looking, first of all, I like basically presented a number of sketches, including one where the mask is opaque, so you can't actually see what the character looks like, which I thought, you know, might be interesting because it means that anybody can kind of imagine what they look like. But then they pointed out then that actually, you know, from an empathy point of view might be more difficult. So you know, it was important, I think, to us to have something that was not going to be gender or race specific, which moved us away from like a human type face anyway. And we had a couple different like animals and more alien looking things. And I've been trying to pitch dinosaurs for everything forever. And I'm usually shot down. I love dinosaurs. Often I'm shot down with like, no, that's for younger kids. Well, for this time, it actually is for younger kids. And they came back and they were like, we love the dinosaur one. I'm like, yes, finally my moment.
You're getting a lot of
So
support in the chat for that. Paige says, all kids love dinosaurs. Amanda Jean says, who doesn't love dinos? This little like dino-centric design is so cute. It's so cute.
so yeah, I think, that was just, again, I mixed that in with the other drawings, and because I'm obsessed with dinosaurs, and was like, maybe this will be the moment. So yeah, Trix definitely went through a bunch of iterations of like what they would look like. And even the name wasn't was I think Trix came from, oh gosh, I came partially from the fact it sounds like T-Rex, but I think it was also, I was looking up famous dinosaur skeleton names. Like apparently, if you go to a museum, they actually name the skeletons. And I think Trix was one of them. And that's, I think, where that name came from as well. So that's a bit of
awesome
there.
I love this like making of stuff with Project Trix. This is awesome. And I like that too. I mean, that is something that the curriculum is really thoughtful and careful about. Like Trix uses they them pronouns, and then they're like, as they're coming, they're actually not, they don't arrive at Earth until the very end. Then we have a dance party, but there's this sort of like preparing for, there's some messaging back and forth. And yeah, there's so many little like empathetic pieces like that. But I totally see, okay, let's not give them a face at all, so that you can kind of project a face that you want on there. But ultimately, I love the face that you drew. I love the little like, because Trix has these little like sidekicks. There's a pet at one point. Trix really wants, let's see if I can find it. Trix wants a pet, but the pet won't fit in their spaceship. There it is. And so we make a virtual pet, which that is everybody's favorite project, by the way. That project slays in classrooms. It slays with 4th grade. It slays with 9th grade. It slays with everybody. Everybody loves that project. And the way that you set it up, basically what they do is they make a Tamagotchi. They make their microbit into a Tamagotchi, but they're encouraged to do a little maker component, which is like, put it in a toilet paper tube or make some cotton balls on it. Like, what would make a good pet or a bad pet? So we've had virtual pet alligators and virtual pet dragons and virtual pet puppies. And so there's this, but there's also, Trix has a little, oh, this is the poetry one, which I used to be an English teacher. That was my background. I love that. But there's one with like some bugs or something. I want to see if I can find that one. Oh, it may not be in the supplemental.
Oh, that was the counter.
The species counter, yeah. And there's all these little like bugs and crickets. Like, were those just for that? Did they originally have like a bigger role or anything? Those bugs and crickets are so cute.
Oh, thank you. No, they were just for that. I love drawing cartoons, so they're always fun to draw those sort of things.
Speaking of drawing and cartoons, I don't know if you've seen this before. Let me make sure this camera is in focus really quick. But for the dance party at the end, we actually created a little puppet of Trix. So here, I'll cut to this camera. I don't know if you've seen this puppet, but we actually have a Trix puppet. Ta-da!
Ah! Oh my goodness, the eyes move.
Yeah. So when we're doing when we're doing the dance party, we're having teachers and educators use their microbits. They just hold their microbits like up to the camera like this. And we're having them press buttons to show like left or right, or they shake it and make it jump. And so then me and Trix are like dancing over here. And then we're like, okay, let's jump, Trix, on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Wow. And then we jump together. So we make a little Trix puppet because again, they're so cute and they gotta be part of the show. So I'm just in love with your design work, Jasmine. It's amazing.
Oh, thank you. I'm so glad.
So within Project Trix, there are 8 different like lessons within there. And again, feel free to, the chat is just like exploding with like positivity and love for these projects you've created, by the way. Amanda Jean says, my students love the virtual pet. Susan says, I love that it also introduces the singular they, them to kids so that they know how to use it, which is great. Trix, Susan says, Trix is so cute. Paige, talking about the virtual pet, says, best project ever. So just everybody loves your work, Jasmine. It's really
just again to make sure I give credit where credit's due. A lot of the projects, or like that one in particular, was adapted from an existing microbit project. So highly recommend, if you haven't already been on the microbit website, they have a ton of free projects. And so some of them were sort of taking existing ones and modifying and adapting them. And so if you like Project Trix, there's like a whole library of projects on their website.
Yeah, on the Microbit website, they have these tutorials. I'll show you one now. Was Virtual Pet adapted from Hamster? There's one called like Pet Hamster or something.
No, I think it was, might have just been called Virtual Pet or something like that. Or something. Yeah. There wasn't a hamster at the time, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
On the there's a couple different places to find some great projects. One of them is on the Make Code home site. They've got these great tutorials. I think the hamster one is down here somewhere. Oh, there's hot potato. There's one of these called Pet Hamster. And so that one is very, very similar to the Virtual Pet. But in these, I'll just show like smiley buttons. These are nice little like self-paced tutorials here if you haven't checked them out. So the projects, like you were saying, the projects in Project Trix, a lot of them have a similar tutorial associated with them. So yeah, where did all those projects come from? Was there, were they all adapted from existing projects on the Microbit site, or were there teachers that consulted with the team? Like, where did those projects come from?
Right. So I was mostly consulting with Microbit directly again, especially Giles, who's sort of the head of the education there. I forget the official name of the role, but you know, he was the one who works a lot with the existing or like developing the projects on the website. If you go and you do one of the video tutorials, you'll hear his voice narrating it. And so we came up with both of the projects together. So some of them were adapting existing ones. Some of them were just projects from scratch for that. So I think like the dance party, I think was developed especially for Project Trix, whereas I think like the Star Unite, I think there's already a Nightlight project, but we modified it to be stars to fit this thing. So there was back and forth of sort of also the other thing is there's different standards we wanted to hit. So we wanted to make sure we had projects that hit all of the standards. And so sort of this continuous process of like figuring out, okay, what are some projects that would work? What are some projects that exist that can be adapted? What are ones we want to come up with from scratch?
Yeah.
So, you know, and I definitely, again, relied very heavily on the Microbits experience with the actual, you know, what works in a classroom setting. So that, yeah.
It's so obvious that like that there was a lot of great consultation going, because like you know, a person who just writes, like someone who just works at like a curriculum house, a content house all day, just wouldn't be able to come up with the richness of the character and the story that you did. And then they had all these like this educational like classroom experience that they brought to bear on here's what's actually going to work in this classroom. And it's in the little things, like in the lesson plans for teachers, the blocks, they have like drawings of all the blocks, and they're not filled in with color because they know that teachers don't get color printers. It's like the little things like that. That's like, oh, right, this was designed by teachers, for teachers, with teachers, right? Like it's just so thoughtful. And we've had a couple questions come in from the chat. So Corinne was wondering, are there any plans to add more projects to Project Trix? It's got 8 in it right now. Are there any plans to add more to it?
That's actually more a question for the Microbit Foundation than for me. You know, I would love to keep working with them and adding more projects. So yeah, I hope so.
But you've got a big fan base of teachers who use this content all the time. I mean, we personally, just over the last 2 years, have taught about maybe 500 teachers the Project Trix curriculum, maybe even more than that. I'm forgetting we did it with a bunch of schools this year too. So somewhere between 500 and 1,000 teachers who then go work with hundreds or thousands of kids themselves. So like, there's a big Project Trix fan base out there. Maybe there can be like Project Trix 2, the Trixening, or the revisits or something, something like that.
Yeah, there was like, and there were so many potential projects that we couldn't all fit. So, you know, it'd be wonderful to expand that. I guess that's something, you know, write to Microbit and see if that's something, you know, that we could continue doing. I think it might be actually updating some of the projects, but there, I don't know
Yeah.
at the moment about new projects. Yeah, I mean,
Well, that was
I do a lot of like microbit projects when I have time on my own, but you know, Project Trix is definitely something that I would have to do in collaboration with them. We'll
yeah.
have to. I would love to. I think it's more a question of, you know.
Yeah, they're the
Yeah.
collaborators on that one. And actually, we are going to have someone from the Microbit Educational Foundation, Lorna, this afternoon joining us. So maybe we can ask her about it. See if she's familiar with Project Trix. If there's any plans to do different versions of that. That was actually another question that came in from Amanda Jean. Is there just the one version of Trix? Was there ever a thought to do it in? Because right now Project Trix is using MakeCode. Are there different versions of this for different languages, or why did you guys pick MakeCode? Or well, tell us about the kind of language selection process there.
I mean, at this point, it is, as far as I know, only in English and just with MakeCode. And the selection actually was because it was developed originally for Infosys. Like the whole project was funded like by Infosys. It was an amazing donation for them to have this project, but it was going to be used primarily in the US. And so that defined the language. And MakeCode is just, you know, when kids are starting with the microbit, they're usually using MakeCode rather than you know, Python is sort of when they're more experienced. And so especially as an entryway, because it is meant to be an introduction into physical computing, MakeCode seemed like the very natural language to start in.
There's a vote in the chat for Project Trix with the microbit Python editor. We've been teaching some folks with that. So what would a high schoolized version of Project Trix be? Maybe something with the Python editor in the future. We're just dropping hints out there. Work that we'd love to see Jasmine Florentine get hired to do, because it's amazing. So
yeah, I mean,
go ahead.
You'd probably want to have an updated story. That would be like more, or maybe even something more interactive, you know, that's like you know, like for instance, I mentioned this LARP that we worked on, which is more middle school age, and so that, you know, already starts to become less of so Project Trix is interactive, but the LARP is almost as much student driven and puzzle driven, like here's these different challenges. So I could imagine something like that working at a high school level, where it's sort of this more puzzle adventure type game, or a story that's just a little bit more age appropriate, and projects that might be more difficult, perhaps more collaborative. There's just the amazing thing about the microbit is it really fits that whole like low floor, high ceiling, wide walls. Like there's so many different directions you can go with it. And you know, once you even without the Python, even if you're just block coding, you can still do a lot of complex things with it. But you know, introducing Python, and especially if you start to introduce, like I'm obviously a little bit obsessed with like motors and stuff because I love mechanical things and robotics, but like if you start to introduce components that can be attached to the microbit as well, that also really opens up the space to kind of start to make more complicated projects.
Yeah. We love using motors here as well. We love making things move and light up. Okay, a couple last questions coming in from the chat. One person, you talked a little bit about standards. What standards did you use or did you align to with the Project Trix curriculum?
I think they were oh my goodness, I'm blanking on the acronym. It was whichever is the like standard one in the US. Is it
CSTA?
Yeah, that sounds. So there was a bunch of different CSTA standards for that age range that we were trying to hit. So things like, you know, introducing variables, or like the idea of functions, or even sort of more, sorry, I like wrote the curriculum a while ago at this point. So
it's been a minute, yeah.
Things. I think actually the actual curriculum says like which standards it hits in there. So, you know, if it's something that you're looking to use in the classroom and you want to see, each lesson will say, or there's actually like a table at the beginning that has like all the projects as well as all the standards that it hits.
Yeah, and I believe you're right. They're the CSTA standards, the Computer Science Teachers Association, which is, they used to say they were the nation's largest CS department, but now they have chapters worldwide. So now they are the world's largest
Whoa.
CS teaching department. So pretty cool. We actually had an awesome panel a couple weeks ago at our Make-A-Thon. I think it was at the last week's of CSTA Equity Fellows who were part of this Equity Fellowship, and they came, and I believe the applications, if you want to be a CSTA fellow, I think they're due today. So if anybody else wants to join that, stay on the Make-A-Thon, but do that in the background. It'll be fun. But my gosh, I'm like looking at the time. We've been talking for the whole time now. This is amazing. I was like, great. So I got 20 minutes left. No, we talked for 40 minutes already. Jasmine, it is so wonderful to talk with you. It's so cool to hear these like making of stories with Project Trix. And just again, if I can impress upon you the strength of the feedback that we get from teachers, this curriculum, the way that it's laid out, the way that it's so visual, the way that it's so friendly, it's making it possible for teachers to use microbits in all sorts of different teaching contexts that they wouldn't be able to do without it. So like you and the work you did on this project have changed so many teachers' classrooms. So like from all the teachers we work with, thank you so much for your work. It's phenomenal.
Oh, wow. Thank you. That means so much to hear. Like I said, that's, why I decided to kind of come back into the STEM education space is just, like, it makes my day basically when I hear from a teacher, that they use my curriculum, or I see like on social media, the projects that the students have built, like to actually just see things making an impact is so important to me. There's one thing I forgot to mention when we were asking about how I like got connected with microbits. I forgot to mention that when I was connecting with freelance, the cover letter I sent was in fact a cover comic, because I wanted to show that one of the things I really wanted to do was to contextualize things in a story. And I was like, well, I could write a boring letter that shows that, or I can actually show that. And so in some ways, when like they approached me with wanting to do this curriculum, that was going to have a character and a story and everything, it was sort of my dream project, is to really kick things off with like, here I'm going to try this freelance thing in STEM, and the thing I love is putting things into stories to make it more approachable, basically. So you don't have kids who are like, I don't know how to do math, I don't want to do this. Like, it isn't about the math, it's about the character and the story and the project, and just making it so that everybody feels like, yeah, I can totally do this.
And like knocked it out of the park, like 100 out of 10, like it's doing that, so and in fact that makes me think that we should from our post surveys that we send to teachers, we get so many positive comments about the Project Trix curriculum. We're going to combine those and send them to you, because you deserve to hear what all these teachers are saying, how what you're doing is impacting their practices and their students. So we'll be sure to send you all the stuff that teachers send us so that you can hear it too.
Thank you.
But everybody, if you would, join me in the chat on thanking Jasmine Florentine. Thank you so much, Jasmine.